Teletubbies is centred around a sense of the sheer joy of being 2 and 3 years old. That's all it is.
Over the hills and far away, Teletubbies come to play.
And now I'm going to give you the Happy Christmas, Teletubbies. 2, 3.
Big hug.
It didn't occur to us that we would have the effect that we have. My feeling is that ever since Teletubbies first transmitted, I've been on trial.
Teletubbies, the BBC's latest programme for very young children, is provoking a storm of criticism. While children seem to be entranced by the 4 colourful tubby characters, many parents and teachers are worried about its lack of speech and question its educational value.
Having already set up Ragdoll Productions to make preschool television programmes, Anne Wood opened a shop as a way of understanding children at play. She found that the abilities of very young children to watch and make meanings from television was underestimated.
Ragdoll was formed because I was thrown out of TVAM, where I'd been extremely successful, I have to say, having done Roland Rat, of which I'm terribly proud. I had to do it in order to go on working, in order to do the kind of work that I wanted to do, which was to address this audience of young children who were watching television in great numbers and who were kind of being overlooked. I got the idea for Rosie and Jim, which was our first real breakthrough programme. Rosie and Jim was the first programme that we'd been able to test with parents and children at home, and the big success of Rosie and Jim was Duck. The greatest pleasure we got was when every tape that came in showed children falling off the sofa laughing every time the duck quacked. Children like Rosie and Jim and have often told us it's because they're so naughty.
Oh dear! Oh no! You made that man all wet.
We were very aware that we'd made 2 characters that were a kind of comic double act, and that who were ragdolls. It didn't give us any opportunity to explore feelings. We would be very interested to see how far we could go making 3 characters who would be friends, even though they were very different. I decided that one of these characters would speak in a different language. And to me, it didn't matter what the language was, but French was the language most often taught in school. And so one of the characters, therefore, would be French.
Tiny, bonjour. Oh, hello, Tilly. Tiny, qu'est-ce qu'il y a dans ta boîte? What's that in my box? Oui. Well, Tilly, the thing is that it's a secret what's in my box.
I very, very much wanted to work with Andy Davenport. He didn't know this at the time, and I thought, well, if I can sort of persuade him into being the second puppet.
All right, then.
I got the part of Tiny, and soon after I began as a performer, I also started writing the scripts. Tots TV is a programme for 3 to 5-year-olds, and so when you are performing for that audience, you perform as much as possible in the way that a 3 to 5-year-old would recognise.
Andy and I were travelling together one time, and Power Rangers was on in the aeroplane, and we were watching what Power Rangers were offering up for children. One of the messages it relayed to them was the way to get things done was to kick everybody. I said to him, oh my God, I wish I could make Ragdoll's answer to Power Rangers. I wanted to make a programme that had the direct opposite message, you know, that big hug was the event of the day, and loving each other and loving each other very much.
Anne had made it known that she was open to receiving ideas for programmes, and that at that stage we were talking a lot about the potential for a programme for older children.
He had other ideas which he occasionally put in front of me, and if they made me laugh, I would say, that's the one. It's always the ones that make me laugh. And there were two little spacemen who were hilariously funny. I mean, they really were brilliant.
These two spacemen lived at the bottom of someone's garden in a magic wood. They were very easily surprised by things and fell over all the time, and when they were worried about things, they hugged each other. And they were basically NASA spacemen. One of the things that fascinated me about NASA spacemen is that there's all this high technology involved in putting a spaceman inside a spacesuit and sending him up into space and landing him on the moon, and it's the most advanced technological thing that ever happens. And then when they climb out of this space pod that's landed on the moon, what do they look like but a little toddler? When I was showing this to Anne seemed to home in on these two characters. She seemed to like these two more than anything else.
And we were trying to develop that for older children because we felt that we needed to raise the age profile. When I was invited by Anna Hume to be one of several companies to tender for this preschool slot, I turned my attention to it and thought of these two little characters and thought, well, how can I do it? How can I actually make 260 programs? How can I actually physically, with the company I've got, which is very small, do this amount of work?
Then Anne said to me, about these two characters. How about that we make them for preschool children and multiply them? I think it was up to 5 at first, and then put them in a magical land, a place where television comes from, and have a magic windmill that rules over that land and that makes a structure for the program.
Children live in a technological world. I was very aware of that through being with children and having opened a shop and observed children and listened to them and their parents.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Dot's house, Tiny speaking. Comment t'appelles-tu?
Tilly wants to know what your name is.
We are in the middle of this technological revolution. It's a sort of cliche, but it is happening. It's not a revolution for children, it's everyday life to them. So I thought that these two space characters that Andy had were absolutely right for placing in a technological environment.
We knew that we wanted to have these full-bodied characters that would sing, dance, jump, and behave to all intents and purposes with the same range of possibilities as real children aged about 1 or 2. They would not be fully competent at any of the things that they were attempting to do, and so that they would sometimes fall over in certain situations or would enjoy falling over. We decided at a very early stage to make these characters baby proportions, that they would have, for instance, shorter legs and shorter arms. They would have a larger head in relation to their bodies, and they would be quite tubby, which is of course where the name came from.
And I said to him, but I cannot work out how to get the world of children together with the world of the characters. I can't do this awful thing of having a television screen. It's so boring. It's not organic to the thing. And he immediately said, as I recall, put the television screens on their tummies, which I thought was a stroke of genius. Whereupon I said, in that case, they'll have to have aerials on their heads to get the pictures. And we started to laugh about that. And that was it, really.
That's what they became. They became these characters with tellies in their tummies. Because their tummies are, for children, your tummy is something that you use quite a lot. You're very proud of it. You stick it out and you move around like this. And so for the Teletubbies to really truly be of television and to love television in that respect, it was very nice to place it there.
Commissioning any preschool programme is quite risky because the great British public always thinks that what went before was better, and there's a huge kind of nostalgia factor attached to preschool programming. So I knew that there was a risk in introducing a new programme.
Wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round.
When Play School was axed, there was a huge outcry. Petitions to the BBC and thousands of signatures and Save Play School campaigns.
It's the play book!
Playdays was a development out of Play School and was very successful.
Where does it stop?
Hello? Playdays on the move.
Gradually, it seemed that Playdays was going increasingly up the age range. So we decided to commission a new show and emphasise the younger age range. So we put it out to tender, and a number of people tendered, and we came to a shortlist, and we went through a process of interview. And some people came and performed with puppets, and some people performed themselves, and Teletubbies appeared, and I think everyone who was sitting in the room when they saw the original concept and designs for Teletubbies thought, wow, there is something that is really different, really new, and very appropriate to the age range.
We worked out that in order for the characters to be 4 different sizes, they would have to be 4 different sized adults, which then meant that everything would have to be scaled up. And then suddenly we realised just how big this was going to be. And we started to build the set, and there was great difficulty because it was very scary. Although we'd been doing tots in the next field here for a long time and no problems at all, another film unit, a drama unit, had been around and upset the local people. It was then seen that we had applied for permission to build this great crater in the nearby fields, and rumour in the local paper got hold of that there was going to be a movie about spaceships landing, whereupon we were stopped working. So I had to go and make an impassioned plea at the next council meeting, but it was 11 weeks before the next council meeting, and I thought, if they don't say yes you can continue, I'm going to have to ring Anna Hume and say, I'm terribly sorry, I've spent a lot of BBC money digging a big hole which I'm now going to have to spend a lot more money filling in again. Fortunately, they believed me when I said it was a programme for little children, we weren't a big film unit, and actually nobody would really get to know about it, because I genuinely believed that nobody would. You know, we hadn't had all this fuss when we built the Tots house, and I didn't see any reason why we should have any kind of fuss for Teletubbies. So I said with great passion and force and truth, they needn't worry, it was for little children, and they were teddy bear-like creatures, and it was going to be fine, and it wasn't an area of natural beauty, and it wasn't on a footpath, and nobody would hear about it, and you know, and they all felt terribly reassured. I knew I would never get as big an opportunity as this again. This was, if you were in preschool television, this slot was the biggest opportunity. When we did Teletubbies, everything was at stake. Every cent that the production company had earned for 15 years. Anna Hume and I had lunch at one point, and we did just sort of look at each other and think, well, you know, we're both of an age, and we said to each other, well, if it doesn't work, better to go out with a bang than a whimper.
Okay, mark it, Pete.
Gypsy's Walk, pick up, shot 178, take 1.
Thank you, suitable.
Honestly, it didn't occur to us that we would have the effect that we have.
In March 1997, Teletubbies was broadcast for the first time.
Teletubbies!
After the first transmission, the complaints were blocking the BBC switchboard, and people started to write, you know, about dumbing down and how more or less, you know, it was against government's policy, and, you know, we were bringing television into disrepute and all this kind of thing.
And that was more or less what our viewers thought. Yeah.
These programmes treat children like idiots who are incapable of understanding normal English.
I was sitting quietly in my office one day, working out various things, when I was rung up and said, would I go to Pebble Mill, because I was required to answer for my actions on BBC News.
Teletubbies, the BBC's latest programme for very young children, is provoking a storm of criticism. While children seem to be entranced by the 4 colourful tubby characters, many parents and nursery teachers are worried about its lack of speech content and question its educational value.
I went along to be on the news feeling quite ill-prepared for this.
Pretty mindless stuff, isn't it?
Not at all, no. I mean, there are 2 misunderstandings, I think, about our starting point for this programme. I got as far as saying, well, I'm afraid, you know, that what the problem is, they haven't understood our starting point, when I was virtually cut off. And I felt terrible. I came out of that studio thinking, I've let everybody down, I haven't justified ourselves. But fortunately for me, many of the parents who saw that broadcast, who'd been watching Teletubbies with children, then took action and rang the BBC and said, we don't agree. So then, of course, the press had got what they love in the summer on the silly season, a controversy.
The tabloids took up the whole Tinky Winky saga, and I never thought this would happen to me. I appeared 2 days running in the Sun, one with a headline over I think, a very unflattering picture of me saying, 59-year-old wrinkly KO's Tinky Winky.
There were all sorts of silly reactions. You know, for a start, there was the feeling that there was the divine right for anybody to actually come and be on this set. One newspaper published a map, so we had everything from scout troops to whatever, you know, tracking and finding their way down here.
The broadsheets took up the educational side of it and the dumbing down and the lack of language. This was the thing that they went on about. So there were two elements within the press, and I think it's fascinating when something starts to get a hold like that. It just goes on, and stories are created because there's this wave, which is the Teletubbies phenomenon.
And then there was the amusing thing of the local regional BBC News did an April Fool's jest where they suggested that instead of you are now entering Shakespeare country, you are now entering Warwickshire, the home of the Teletubbies. And of course most people believed it.
The Warwickshire border. In all, 100 are being changed, costing the county's ratepayers £25,000. But the council feels it's money well spent.
Shakespeare has served the county of Warwickshire enormously well over the years. But the council decided now it was time for a change of image, and obviously the Teletubbies is a very appropriate image, particularly with its appeal to young people today.
I think what people didn't understand was how young it was geared, and that it was really meant for very, very small children, and children who were just beginning to come to language in many cases. And what was really interesting was that there were a lot of parents who wrote in, and there were also stories in the press about kids who were actually finding it hard to speak, to get language, actually coming to it through Teletubbies.
There have been certain anxieties expressed about the language in Teletubbies, particularly the language that the Teletubbies use, which is this play language based on the emergent speech of a 1-year-old child. The child who is watching Teletubbies is perfectly aware that the Teletubbies are speaking a play language, that the Teletubbies are joking, that it's not real, that the whole thing is one big game. And that is probably why we find that children tend to like Teletubbies, because it plays along with them. And what we've tried to do with Teletubbies is to put as many different types of language into the programme.
Teletubbies gone?
The question of language always comes up, and you know, are children going to talk strange languages if they hear or watch strange languages on television? I don't think so at all. I think children will learn to speak in their own due course, in their own due time, and certainly the children who watched Bill and Ben didn't end up talking flubber-lubber all the time, and the clangers generation I don't think went around whistling non-stop.
The clangers were mouse-type persons who lived on a moon, somewhere out in space.
Maybe far in advance of ours.
They live on green soup, which is delivered from a soup well by the soup dragon, naturally, as one would, you know. And they ate blue-string pudding. I think we never actually found out where the blue-string pudding came from, but they ate it. It was our first colour film, and the BBC said, we want something absolutely marvellous, and it's got to be better than the last thing you did, darling, and it's got to be modern and up-to-date. Well, 1969, the most up-to-date thing was the space programme.
Something coming down. Everybody hide, quick. Keep quiet.
We wanted something which could be universally appreciated. We wanted something which could be inflected, so it was like language, but it didn't have to be words quite. So I got a swanny whistle, this, and I just one can inflect.
I can't remember how old I was when I watched the clangers. I can only describe it as a visual poetry, really, because things would do things for no reason, but it made a kind of sense. You understood. Coming back to it now, I can see exactly why, because it's just the most fantastic thing. And if Teletubbies had a tenth of the poetic joy of the clangers, then I'd be absolutely over the moon, because it's fabulous. When you go back to the children's programs that were around when I was young, there are an awful lot of similarities between those programs and Teletubbies. Programs like Andy Pandy were paced very, very slowly. They did things again and again. They did things to music.
Once again, Andy.
Jumping, jumping, jumping up and down. We've been very, very fortunate in that we've learned from these early programs, but we've also learned from how people's television watching has changed and how children's television watching has changed. Children are very much more au fait with cameras, the screen, the computer screen. You know, they're much more screen literate from a very, very young age. You know, they will change channels at 18 months without a demur.
Everything in Teletubbyland is designed so that it can pose possibilities. And if you have a flat landscape, you can hide things only in very few places. But that's not really exciting enough. So the landscape is designed so that within it you can hide things. When the Teletubbies walk down to camera, it defines their path a lot better if they're going over hills. And it's more interesting to the eye for both an adult and to a child. It's obviously more important to interest the eye of a very small child because they're still learning about spatial relationships. So to make a rolling landscape just enhances everything that we're trying to do physically on screen. We're always working with notions that are spatially set out because it's a very important thing to children to understand the concept of near and far and through and up and down. And within the landscape of Teletubbyland are all the possibilities for all those notions to be explained just in the everyday motions of the Teletubbies. Also, from my point of view, when I'm writing a script, it gives me another dimension to work with, because it means that there is always something going on the screen, even when there's, on the surface of things, nothing going on. So, for instance, you could have one of the Teletubbies, let's say Tinky Winky, pop up way off in the hills, miles and miles away, and then just make his way down over the hills with his bag, thoroughly enjoying himself in the lovely sunshine. Up and over all of the hills, gradually coming closer and closer, getting bigger and bigger, which to a child is a fascinating thing to watch, because you're seeing something that's revealing itself very gradually. And then just turns around, and then he can walk all the way back up to the horizon again and disappear. And he can come and do that again if he wants, and again as many times as you like. The thing about that is that not only is it fascinating to watch for a child, but it's so full of possibilities and so full of expectation that you're dying to watch it again, even as an adult. The simpler you get, the funnier it is. And there were, I can remember in Monty Python there were sketches where things like that happened, where I think, there was a man who appeared over a hill and ran down to Len's, and I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he ran back again. Is extremely informative for a child on a lot of different levels at once.
It's
In Benny Hill, everything always ends with this absurd chase. It's probably no great coincidence that in Teletubbies everything ends with an absurd chase, because it's a very, very funny thing. When you're looking at an audience of children, it has a very particular use, because children at that age are very much obsessed with that kind of action, with lining up and running in and out of frame, across frame, round and round things, foreground to background, because that's what children do all day. And while they're doing that, they're making a sense of the world. that skill that they are acquiring at that age. And before they learn their alphabet or learn, you know, anything, basically, anything in a formal way, they have to acquire that skill, because that is the basic skill that will take you through the whole of your life.
Apart from the wonderful place that Teletubbies will hold in the history of children's programming, it generated a national, here in the U.S., really a worldwide debate over the use and value of television in people's homes.
I was really pleased about getting programs on in America, because I felt that we've had so many of their programs over here. I have to say I'd been going for 4 years before that, cold calling and having the door shown to me very quickly. But then when I discovered Alice, who'd just been appointed to PBS, and she said, "We like your programme," it was a turning point in Ragdoll's career.
And we saw Tots TV, which was the first project of Ann Wood's that PBS picked up. And it was while talking to Ann about Tots that we learned about the development of Teletubbies.
What's that?
The fact that Teletubbies explored new ground, the fact that it looked really different than anything people had seen before, the fact that people hadn't heard that kind of conversation about children's acquisition of language, hadn't really heard those conversations about the importance of humor in children's programming and the importance of humor in learning. Those conversations happened 30 years ago when Sesame Street was invented out of the Children's Television Workshop.
Here we go, still rolling. In 5, 4, 3, 2.
H, my name is Harry, and I like to eat hamburgers. No, hot dogs with mustard and relish on a bun and a pint of...
Harry, the game.
Oh, right, sorry. The game's making me hungry. Ooh, hungry. That's a word that starts with the letter H. Yeah, this is a great game. Where was I? Oh, yeah. And my favorite pet, the hamster.
In those long ago days, there wasn't quite the kind of debate that Teletubbies caused about what seems to be the shocking revelation that children under the age of 2 were actually watching television as well. There was, in many ways, the opposite reaction to Teletubbies. That is to say, many of the critical arguments early on were about should children be exposed to, if you will, serious learning, cognitive, which was the emphasis in those days, letters and numbers and thinking skills, or shouldn't they be allowed to play and to grow up a little older as children? So we got criticized for being educational, just in the way that Teletubbies gets criticized for being baby talk. So it's kind of the opposite argument.
I think any program that can generate that kind of conversation between children's advocates, academics, parents, child care providers, and stands up to that level of scrutiny, which Sesame Street certainly did 30 years ago, and Teletubbies does absolutely right now, is a positive not only for children, but for us in learning how children use television and what role television plays in our lives. We revoiced the sort of overarching narration to a sort of different accent. But other than that,
why mess with a good thing?
One day in Teletubbyland, Poe stood on one leg.
What the repetition of the inserts allows children to do is the second time they see it, they can begin to predict what's going to happen. Oh, I know what's going to happen. The girl is going to go here, or the man is going to play the guitar this way. It's a tremendously wonderful, empowering feeling for the children watching. It's such a simple idea. You think to yourself, geez, why didn't somebody think about that before?
That was the bravest thing we did. It was nothing to do with what the Teletubbies looked like. It was actually making the conscious decision to repeat something on a broadcast programme exactly the same as you just seen it. And that was born out of my belief that children understand what television is.
Anyone with a child knows that children love repetition. There's no such thing as reading a story to them they like once. It has to be 4 times or every night. And I thought that it was a wonderful way, for example, just taking the repetition of a child watching something and then watching again and beginning to absorb and recognize in itself that it was absorbing more details, waiting for something to happen. That must teach it something, but I mean, I can see at the very worst it's a bit dull for an adult to watch the same thing twice. But now, having watched, every single Disney video 15,000 times, that's just seemed to me the least of my troubles. If a character speaks to a child, there's an identification that's very comforting and very comfortable. So I don't have a problem with the fact that my young child would want a doll or a character or a game or a book or a sweatshirt that has a picture of that character on it. It just means that it meant something to them. I don't know a lot of 18-month-olds who go shopping by themselves, so that you have to wonder who created this merchandising frenzy, parents or children.
The program just went on the air in the United States in April. Less than a month later, when the product came out, there was such a tremendous demand. Usually you have a long lead time for a television program on before you see the product, and you build an audience. The Teletubbies instantly hit with the public, and they were looking for it and clamoring for it. Parents are seeing the program and liking the program and saying, this is a good thing for my child to have. And then you have some adults that just love the Teletubbies and are buying it for themselves.
Hey, do you like Lala?
I like Lala.
Who's your favorite?
I think I like Tinky Winky the best. I don't know why, I just do.
The whole issue of merchandising is one that has been around for a very long time. Muffin the Mule was merchandised. There were play school books and play school dolls and Jackanory books. And somehow I think people always think that books are okay, but toys are a bit wicked. Also, I think there is absolutely nothing wrong in having quality merchandising which children enjoy having, which extends the program, and why not?
I think the research evidence suggests that little children, or indeed children in general, do not watch whatever is on. And very little children are actually very hard to capture. It's very hard to command their attention. Certainly anecdotal evidence suggests that Teletubbies is being extraordinarily successful in that respect. It is grabbing kids' attention. The idea that you can easily capture the attention of a 2-year-old, well, any parent will tell you that that's very far from being the case. So this is a difficult audience to reach, but I think a very important audience to reach. And they need programs that are specifically designed for them.
One of the significant differences when you're working for very little children is to understand that all learning is through the senses. And so if you are taking something like, for example, the puddle in the rainy day, and just the sheer pleasure of splashing in the puddle, is when you splash in the puddle, that is all you're experiencing with all of your senses.
Bubble.
When we do our Teletubbies sketch, we would allow time for them to experience that wonderful sensation of stepping in the puddle, and it's don't step in the puddle, Tinky Winky, and waiting and waiting and waiting, and then Tinky Winky gloriously, splashes straight through the puddle, and really we take time to enjoy the moment.
Mind the puddle, Tinky Winky.
Mind the puddle, Tinky Winky.
Pardon?
Mind the puddle, Tinky Winky.
Pardon?
Ready to have a Tinky Winky.
What's that?
And it's that really, I think, in all little children's work, is knowing they need time to enjoy the moment. And if they're really enjoying looking at something or absorbed in something, they are not listening, although they might hear.
Time for Tubby bye-bye. Time for Tubby bye-bye. Time for Tubby bye-bye.
At the end of every program is the bye-bye game. And that really is because we have to agree with the child at home and give them plenty of notice as well that the program is now coming to an end.
Bye-bye, Tinky Winky.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Dipsy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Lala.
We think they've all gone to bed, and suddenly one of them pops up and says boo, as if they haven't really got the point at all that they're supposed to be saying goodbye.
Boo!
At which point all the others think that's a fantastic new game, and they start the new game, which is popping up and saying hello again.
No.
No.
So the narrator then has to say no, very firmly, because we really are running out of time here in program terms. And so then we go through the whole ritual all over again. Bye-bye Tinky Winky, bye-bye Dipsy, bye-bye Lala, bye-bye Po.
Bye-bye, Lala.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Po.
The Teletubbies are literally playing sort of body-sized peekaboo at the end of, now I'm gone, now I'm back, now I'm gone, now I'm back. It's hysterical. And the wonderful thing about it, when you think about the use of humor, is that not only is it a fun game for children to play, but it also speaks to a real fear in our children's lives about object permanence. If something goes away, will it come back? For instance, when my mommy drops me off at daycare, is she ever going to come back? And the fact is, of course, Mommy does come back. And the fact is, the Teletubbies, of course, they do come back. They go away, but they come back. They go away. So it not only is it funny, not only is it a fun game for children to play, but it also speaks to real developmental interests and needs that young children have. And that, frankly, is the beauty of the series.
You are always terribly pleased when somebody tells you, do you realise what you've made? And you say, oh yes, that's wonderful. But actually, it's just fantastic. The children enjoy it so much.